Today's daf we're going to be learning is Avodah Zarah daf kaftet. Quick announcements. The first thing is I will be teaching in Los Angeles on July 29th. So if anybody's around or has friends there and wants to spread the word, so feel free to reach out to us. We'll send you the flyer and you can send it around. And just a reminder again, we're getting the bookmarks ready. We already started having sponsorships come in. If anyone else would like to sponsor one, please let us know. And with that, we'll get started. So we're in the middle of trying to figure out all of these different ailments and what is best to do. And then we ended with a list of things that this is good for that and that's good for that, but don't switch because it'll be dangerous if you use that for the wrong ailment and you can make it much worse. So we're up to the fourth word on our daf. Chala l'sibore. Sibore is a word we're going to see a lot in the beginning of today's daf, which is bloodletting, right? Bloodletting was something that was very common to do. In fact, I spoke to a friend recently who was learning the daf and said, oh yeah, I bumped into someone who mentioned to me, oh yeah, I just came back from bloodletting. So apparently people still do this, even though it's not as common as it was in those days. So we're going to learn all sorts of things that are good or bad for bloodletting. So chala l'sibure. So sibure is bloodletting. Chala is not chala, but it's vinegar. So vinegar for bloodletting, or minune l'tanita, or small fish for after a fast. Bachilufa sakanta. But if you eat the small fish after bloodletting, or you eat the vinegar after fasting, not good. Tachle v'sibure sakanta. If you have cress with bloodletting, bad idea. Ishata v'sibure sakanta. Having fever and then going and bloodletting is dangerous. Right? They would only do it when they were healthy, but if you do it when you're not, it's not a good idea. If you have a pain in your eye and you bloodlet, also not a good idea. Sheni ledag dam v'sheni ledam dag. Okay, this is kind of funny play on words. Shlishi lo sakanta. So what does this mean? The second day after eating fish, you can go bloodletting, and the second day after bloodletting, you can eat fish. Okay, so it's the reverse, but shlishi lo sakanta, but you shouldn't do it on the third day. Okay, and you also presumably shouldn't do it on the first day because it's saying specifically the second day, not the third, not the first. So the second day after eating fish, you shouldn't bloodlet. The second day after bloodletting, you shouldn't eat fish. Second day you can, but first and third you shouldn't. Tanu Rabbanan, bright. Hamakiz dam lo yochal chagbash. Now, if you thought chagbash was a new dish, it's not. Chagbash is what we call an abbreviation for four things. Chet, gimel, bet, shin. Lo chalav, lo gvina, lo betzalim, velo shechalaim. So when you bloodlet, you shouldn't eat the following things, right? They mean like after bloodletting, don't eat milk, not cheese, not onions, and not cress. Imachal, if you did, what should you do to counter the effects of it? Take a quarter log of vinegar and a quarter log of wine. They mix them together, and drink them. And by the way, as an aside, when you go to the bathroom after that, they would go do their thing outside the city. Do it in the east side of the city, because the smell is really bad, and we want the wind to blow it out in the other direction, outside the city and not inside the city. Remember, we had the whole thing about which winds are the strongest winds and what direction they go in. Okay. You can put back, remember we had the jaw coming out of place and other things. So if this unkali comes out of place, you can put it back in its place on Shabbat. My unkali, what is this? Rabbi Abba, istumcha deliba. Okay, now notice the word istumcha. It's like stomach. Okay, so this doesn't exactly mean stomach, and there's different interpretations really what it means. I'll go with the Koran's translation. It's the edge of the ribs, which is near the heart. That's why it says liba, of the heart. It means it's near the heart, and it got kind of out of place or bent, something like that. My asut, how do you cure it? My kamuna karavaya. Okay, bring kumun, which is cumin. Okay, we're now going to mix a bunch of spices together. Kravaya, some people think means a handful. Some people think it actually means another herb. So either it's giving a measure of how much cumin, or it's actually caraway. Okay, so let's just go with cumin, caraway, ninya, which is nana, which is mint, agdana, which is wormwood, sikre is saturija, maybe you know what it is, I don't, and avadata is hyssop. Now, put those all together. Laliba, if it's for your heart, then you put them all together, bechamra, and you soak them in wine. V'simanech, how do you remember this? We're now going to basically say, this is like a combination of herbs that if you put them together and you put them in different substances, it will be better for various ailments. So if it's for your heart, put them all in wine and then drink it. Simanech, how do you remember this? Yain nisamach levav enosh. Okay, wine makes the heart of people happier. So now look at wine goes with heart. That's how you remember. Put them in your wine if you have an issue with your heart. Lerucha, for wind, b'maya. Okay, this sounds like maybe you have some sort of cold, you have a disease from the wind. Simanech, you'll see why they called it wind and not something else, because they wanted you to remember the pasuk and associate it with that. V'ruach Elohim merachefet al pnei hamayim. Okay, this is from the creation, right? And there you see ruach going with water. Lekuda b'shichra. For a kuda, which is a woman that got there was a draft or something like that, got sick in labor, she should have beer. Okay, again, that doesn't mean drink beer. It means soak all these things in beer and then give it to her. Right, we're still in this combination of these bunch of herbs you're supposed to use. V'simanech v'chada al shichma. Now we know why they called her kuda, because they wanted you associated with it. Obviously, kuda was a term they used. I just don't know if there was the typical term for this, but they used it so you remember the pasuk kada al shichma. This one works the least well of all the others, because we're supposed to remember shechar from the word shichma. Now shin and kaf are the same. The last letters obviously not, but if you remember, right, the kad is on her shoulder, then you remember the kuda has the shech that puts it in the shechar and the beer. So he would, now we're going to see how to make this drug, okay? So different people made it in different ways. So what would he do? He would grind them all up together, and then he would take a whole handful of it, of the mixed up substance, and put it in this drink, and then he would drink it, right, depending on what he needed it for. Rav Ashi, he would do each one separately, grind them each separately, and then he would take his big finger and his little finger, like a finger full, okay, of each one of the spices, and then put it in the mixture and then eat it, drink it. Amar Papa, come to Papa, we saw Abaye say something like this yesterday. Ana avde lekol hane, I tried all these velo itase, and it didn't actually help me. And this is, I was thinking, we didn't say this yesterday, but here, we'll keep reading and then I'll say, Ada Amrle Ahutaya, but then there was this nomad, this Arab merchant, right? Why was it important that they're nomads? Because they go from place to place and they pick up information along the way. So they're often good sources of information. And he told me, okay, this is what you should do. And actually, you're going to see it heals him. And I think maybe they're counterbalancing this whole thing about the rabbis knowing everything about everything. Maybe saying, well, when it comes to medicine, there might be other opinions you might want to accept, especially they're quoting these Arab merchants, who certainly weren't on their high list of, people that they generally associated with and learned from, certainly not Torah, but when it comes to medicine, perhaps it's worthwhile to listen to them. So what did he tell him? I take a new jug, umal yamaya, fill it up with water, urami be tarvada deduvsha, and then put a tarvad as a measurement. It's a cup, a spoonful. Put a spoonful of honey in it. Detale lebe kuchve. Hang it outside in your courtyard of your house, under the stars, meaning overnight. Ulamachal, and then in the morning, ishtei, and drink it in the morning. So basically, it's water and honey, okay, left out at night. Avde hachi v'itase. I did this, and it cured me. Tanu Rabbanan. Now we have another bright. Shisha dvarim merapim et hacholem michayo v'fuatam refuah. There's 6 things that help heal sick people, like kind of general things that are good to eat, and it will be, a final cure. Eluhain, what are these? Kruv, cabbage, tradin, beets, mesi sinivesha, dried chamomile water, like dried chamomile soaked in water, kevat, the stomach of an animal, veheret, the womb of an animal, v'yoteret hakaved, and the lobe of the liver. V'yeshomrim, aftagim ktanim, some people say even small fish. V'lo ela shedagim ktanim mafilim umarbin kol gufo shel adam. And dagim, small fish, are actually very good, right? It probably comes from v'yidgu larov kerav haaretz, right? The fish procreate a lot, and they were used as the blessing of Yaakov to the grandchildren, which is the dagim help rejuvenate your body, basically. Helps lafrot v'larabot, in this case means to rejuvenate things in your body. Asachat dvarim now, as opposed to the 6 things that are good to eat. Now we're going to hear the 10 things that if you're sick, you shouldn't eat them. And machzirim et hacholeh lecholyo, they bring back the disease, v'cholyo kasher, and in a much harsher state, okay, much more aggressive state. Elohim, these are them. Ochel basal shol, the meat of an ox. Shuman, the fat. Basar tzli, roasted meat. Basar tziporim, bird, meat from the birds. Beitzat tzluya, roasted egg. Shachalayim, which is cress. Tiglachat, okay, this isn't to eat, but this is shaving. Umerchatz, the bathhouse. Ugvina, the cheese in general. And kaved, the liver. Okay, all these things are bad. Yeshomrim, some people say afagozim, also walnuts. Yeshomrim, av kishuim, also kishuim, which could be in the zucchini family, could be in the cucumber. Okay, and Tanuz Be'er Bishmael, we saw this in Daf Yudalid. Laman kashman kishuim, why are they called kishuim? Mipnei she'en kashin l'chol gufo shel adam kecharavot, because they're hard for a person's body, like swords. Okay, they're just bad for you. I don't know if they're bad for you in general, but certainly if you're sick. Okay, done with all the ailments now and the remedies. Now we're going to move on back to our Mishnah. Aim mistaplim mehem b'chol makom. So we shouldn't get haircuts from an idol worshiper anywhere, according to Rabbi Meir. The rabbi said only in private. It's a problem in public, you can. And now we're going to learn that there's also an issue of a Jew giving a haircut to an idol worshiper, in particular issue. Tanu Rabbanan, so bright. Well, if you're getting a haircut from an idol worshiper, you should look in the mirror. Okay, we're going to get back to this. What situation are we talking about? Didn't we just say you can't get a haircut from them? And okay, we'll see. And if you're a Jewish hairdresser and you're giving a haircut to an idol worshiper, you should move your hand away, meaning stay far away from the belorit. Remember, that was the part of their hair they would grow long and they would offer it up to their gods in the back of their neck. So stay away from that area. Later in the Gemara, we're going to get to how much away do you need to stay. So don't go anywhere near that, because you're basically helping them to worship their idols. Amar. So now we're going to go first to the first line, and then we'll get back to the second line of the Braita. Hechidami, what's the case? If you're in the public domain, lamali mara'ah. How's the mara'ah going to help you? In other words, why do you need a mara'ah? You're allowed to do it according to the rabbis. And and if you're in a private domain, what's going to help you if you have a mirror? So they say it must be we're talking about in a private domain. And what does the mirror help you? Well, it makes you look like you're an important person because you have a mirror. Okay, this is funny because nowadays kind of everybody has mirrors. It doesn't mean it's not a status thing. In those days, if you had a mirror, it was a status thing. Could be, I don't know. I didn't look into it more. I don't know if anyone discusses. Could be we're talking about that the idol worshiper comes to your house, and if you have a mirror in your house, it looks like you're a prominent person. Or it could be if you walk around with a mirror, it makes you a prominent person. I don't know, unclear. Rav Chana bar Bizna have a mistaper me'avei kochavim b'shvilei de Nahardea. He was on these side roads of Nahardea, and he got this haircut. So you could see why it's going to be a little tricky here, because it's sort of public, it's sort of private, okay? And that's what makes this area a little unique. Going to see. So Amar le'echana yai ko'ech lezuga. Wow, your throat, the idol worshiper says to him, your throat is like tempting my scissors. Okay, basically meaning I want to kill you. So Amar, he says to himself, Titili, Magiali, right, is what they say in Hebrew. I deserve this. Why? Da'avre ad Rabbi Meir, because I didn't listen to Rabbi Meir, who said don't ever, no, in any circumstances, get a haircut from an idol worshiper. To which the Gemara says, wait a minute. He was in the Shvil of Nahardea. That's not a private space. So it sounds like he was going against the rabbis as well. The rabbis said only in a private... I'm sorry. I said the opposite. The Shvilei Nahardea were private spaces. And the rabbis didn't allow it there either, because there's not, it's not a public space. It's not the middle of the road, the Rishut Rabim. Obviously, the point is there's a big gap, and this is what this is discussing, between really private and really public. What about kind of in the middle? So it seems like these roads in Nahardea, they're thinking right now, well, they're pretty private. Not a lot of people go there. So sounds like he was also over under what the rabbis said. Right? The rabbis permitted it in Rishut Rabim. They didn't permit it in a private domain, and this is like a private domain. So why did he say only, I deserve this because I went against Rabbi Meir? He seems to really go against the rabbis as well. Well, V'hu when he said this, he thought, they're kind of saying he was wrong, but he thought that Shvilei Nahardea kevan deshlichei Rabim kerishut Rabim dami. Since a lot of people do walk through there, he viewed it as a public domain, so he thought it was okay, and he was just really going against Rabbi Meir, but he thought he was at least keeping within the rabbis, but really, even it was against the rabbis, and that seems to be why he ends up. Now, it doesn't say he got killed, maybe he figured out a way to save himself. Seems like he was alive to tell the story, so, okay. Now we get to this belorit, and you might remember this might sound a little familiar, and you're going to see why in a minute. Bikama, how much? Amar Rav Malkia, Amar Rav Ada bar Ava, Shalosh etzbaot l'chol ruach. Rav Malkia comes and says in the name of Rav Ada, it's 3 fingers, the width of 3 fingers in each direction. That's how far away you have to stay from the belorit. Now notice this is Rav Malkia, and now we're going to remember there's Rav Melchio, Rav Malkia, and people confuse them, and they gave a way to remember, right? They wanted you to remember which machlokot is it Rav Melchio speaking, and which ones is it Rav Malkia. So Amar Rav Chanina Bered Rav Ika, we're going to have a machlokah between him and Rav Papa as to who said what. It's a good chance to review 6 sugyot that we learned. Shapud, Shvachot, V'gumot, Rav Melchio, Belorit, Efer Maklei, Ugvina, Rav Malkia. Okay, what's nice is the 2 of these are sugyot in our Masechet. Okay, so shapud. Shapud is when you have this is the laws of muktzah on Yom Tov. When you use your skewer to cook your meat, and then you ate the meat and left the skewer over, it's disgusting, right? It's like dirty. Nobody really wants to touch it. That creates a situation where it's muktzah. But Rav Melchio permitted it to move tiltal menatzad. That's like a way of, kind of moving something that moves it. You can get it out of the way in some way because it's disgusting and you don't want it in front of you. So we can find a way, he finds a way to be able to allow you to move it. Shvachot, this is the one that's always easier to remember, I think. But there's a woman has responsibilities in the household, but as long as she has maidservants to do some of the work, if she has 1, then she doesn't have to do this. If she has 2, she doesn't have to do that. If she has 3, and there's a whole list of all the things a woman doesn't need to do, if she has maidservants to do those jobs for her. If she has 4 shvachot, you see how much a woman was expected to do, the work of 4 maidservants. The Mishnah says if she has 4 shvachot, she doesn't have to work anymore, she can just sit and do whatever she wants. But Rabbi Elazar comes and says this is bad for women. It's going to lead them to zima. It's going to lead them to promiscuous relations with other men because they have nothing to do, and not doing anything isn't good. So he recommends that she work with the wool. Right? I think it might even be she should be doing the spinning or something. But anyway, she should keep busy because it's not good for her. So even if she has shvachot to do all of her stuff, she still should do something. And Rav Melchio paskins like Rabbi Elazar. Okay, next one, gumot. This is in simanim of shtei sa'arot, of maturity. If you have gumot, Rav Melchio says, which is you have the place where a hair follicle usually grows from. So if you have 2 of those, even though there's no hair, we assume there was hair and it fell out, and therefore we consider the child mature. That's all Rav Melchio. Belorit, which is our case. Efer mikle is if you people would put ashes on wounds to heal them. If you put ashes on a wound, though, he says it's forbidden because it looks like tattooing, because it makes a permanent marking on your body, and therefore it's forbidden. Gvina is the Gentiles' cheeses, which are forbidden because Rav Melchia comes and explains it's because they would put lard on top of it, and that's what makes their cheeses forbidden. So those are the 6 things. Amar Rav Papa, matnitin umatnita Rav Malkia, shmatata Rav Melchio. So he says, no, I have a different way of splitting who said what. You could see why people got confused because their names are very similar sounding. He said anything that has to do with a Mishnah or a Braita was said by Rav Malkiah, and anything was on just an Amora'itic statement is Rav Malkiah with a Vav. And then Simana, how do you remember this? Matnita Malkata, because Matnita is Braita or Mishnah, right? And Malkata is Rav Malkiah and not Rav Malkiah, and that's how you remember. My benayu. So what's the difference? Which one doesn't belong on the right, is in the wrong list? Ika benayu shvachot. So they say shvachot is on the wrong list because the shvachot came from a Mishnah, and that's on the list of Ramalkiah. It should be on the list of Ramalkiah. And some people say, and that's switched dafka with Efer Maklek, because that also doesn't have any basis in the Mishnah, and therefore it's on the wrong side. So switch those two. Okay, I think there's a bit of a machloket about what else, whether the other one gets switched. It's just shvachot goes there. Anyway, we'll leave that for now. Turning now to Amud Bet and a new Mishnah. That finished that section. Now we're moving to Elu Dvarim Shel Avdei Kochavim Asurin V'Isuran Isur Hana'ah. These are the things of Avdei Kochavim, that of idol worshippers, that are forbidden, and not only can you not eat them, but they're forbidden to benefit from. Although we're going to see there's a machloket about some of these cases in the Mishnah. Okay, the very famous one is Hayayin, the wine. And this starts off the topic of Yain Nesach, which we're really not going to address now. It's going to come up much later in the Masechet. We're going to come back to it. Okay, we're going to get off on all sorts of other things, but we're going to come back later to really deal with Yain Nesach. But the idea is that the wine in those days was very often offered as libations to the gods, and therefore there's a concern if an idol worshiper comes in contact with your wine, then you're not allowed to use it because, or you want the Gentiles' wine, or we're going to see all sorts of other things in our Mishnah that have to do with wine. It's forbidden because it's possible they offered it up to their gods as a libation. This is a prohibition that's still in existence today, even though we've said, idol worshippers means idol worshippers, and we're not mostly dealing with idol worshippers, but we're not allowed to drink wine that was open, that a Gentile comes in contact with. That's why in a restaurant, right, if there's non-Jewish workers there, they'll always make sure the Jewish, the mashgiach comes and pours the wine, or whatever it might be. Right? My daughter was just in abroad, and she said she went to a kosher restaurant, and she said, "Oh yeah, I talked to the mashgiach for a bit." I said, "How'd you talk to the mashgiach?" "Well, he came to pour the wine." So, that's the typical. Okay, so now we have, these are things that are forbidden. They're wine, hachometz shel avdei kochavim shayam mitchilato yain. They're vinegar that belongs to them that was originally wine. Okay, now this is kind of obvious. We're going to get in the Gemara. What did they teach? Because obviously if it was wine, and it could have been offered as libation, the fact that it's vinegar now, obviously it's going to still be forbidden, because it could have been offered as Avodah Zarah. And this is all from Tikrovet Avodah Zarah. Anything that was offered up to their gods is forbidden, again, not only to drink, also to benefit from, which means if we sell it or anything else. The Cheres Hadrayani, okay, this is the topic of flashback this week, which it's a very interesting thing. Okay, this is like a very modern nowadays. There's always in the market, they're always trying to come up with better ways to do things. This is clearly a very creative invention. They would take earthenware vessels. Now, earthenware vessels absorb things, so they would put wine in it. The wine would get absorbed into the sides of the vessel, and when they would go, particularly to war or things like that, they would take these vessels with them, and then they would pour water into them because they didn't have wine on the battlefield. They would pour water in, and the wine would come out from the sides and give it flavor, and it would taste like wine. So this is a good creative thing they came up with. But you can obviously figure out, because the wine is absorbed in the sides of the vessel and then comes out in whatever you're pouring. So obviously that's going to be forbidden. Orot levuvin. This is, they would cut out the hearts. They would basically make incisions in the skin and the hide of the animal opposite the heart. Cut out the heart and offer up the heart to their gods. So the hide that has these cutouts exactly in the place where the heart was, those are forbidden as well, because they were using them to worship their idols. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel omer, b'zman she'akera shelo agol asur, mashuch mutar. It depends what the incision is. If the incision was long and rectangular, that's not how they would cut them for offering the gods. They would only cut them in circular shapes. So if they would cut them in circular shapes, then it would be forbidden, because that would be a sign that they took it out to offer to their gods. Okay, next. Sorry, I just lost my place for a second. Okay. Basar nechnas la'avodah zarah mutar, v'hayotze asur mipnei shu kezivchei metim. So meat that is going into a house of idol worship, so it was slaughtered, and now they take the meat into the house of idol worship, and let's say a Jew stops them and the guy says, oh, you want my meat? And gives him the meat. That's permitted because it hasn't yet gone in, it wasn't yet offered. But hayotze, if it comes out of the house of the idol worshiper, asul, mipnei shu kazivchei metim, divrei Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says this is forbidden because it's like zivchei metim. We'll see this pasuk later again, but they worship Baal Peor. Said it was like it uses the words in the pasuk there, zivchei metim. It's like offerings that they slaughtered to their gods, and that they're like dead offerings because they're going to idols, which are useless, and they're forbidden, right? Anything that's zivchei metim is forbidden b'hana'ah. We're going to learn all this soon. Halchim litarput. If people are on their way to tarput, asur lasef v'lateitim lahem. You can't do business with them. Okay, what is tarput? Different explanations, but it seems like from the Yerushalmi it was a festival that people would go to. So you can't start dealing with them because it was a festival where they worshipped idols. And if you, again, this goes back to our first Mishnah in the very beginning of Avodah Zarah. If you do that and you do a business dealing with them, and then they go to their festival where there's idol worship, they're going to thank their gods for the business deal. But if they're leaving the festival, it's fine because you don't have to worry. Maybe they're going to go back into the festival. Once they leave, you can assume they left. Hanodot havdei kochavim. If you use their flasks, v'kankanehem, their jugs, v'yayin shel Yisrael kanus behem, even if you take jugs from them, but you have your own wine in it, you didn't use their wine, you just use their jugs. Now, generally for kashrut, what do we say? You can't cook in their vessels. Let's say whatever gets absorbed will come out with heat and cooking. But when it comes to wine in vessels, and this we saw with the Hadrian vessels, that it gets absorbed and it comes out as well. So therefore, if you have your wine in there, it's still asulin, v'sulani sorana, and it's also forbidden to benefit from divrei Rabbi Meir, because the concern is if I put my wine in there, there might be a little bit of wine of theirs that will come in and give it flavor. Right? This goes back to like in kashrut. So this isn't like kashrut because it's not through heat, but since there are these earthenware vessels, it really does come out, or even these other flasks, which aren't earthenware, but usually leather. The assumption is the flavor comes out. And according to Rabbi Meir, so even though it's, generally there's laws of beetle nullification, no laws of nullification here, and it's going to be not only forbidden to drink, also forbidden to benefit from. But the rabbis say, no, chachamim omrim, ein isuran isur na'ah. We don't go so far. It's just got a little bit of, taste of yain nesach. We're not going to go that far and forbid it to benefit from. Hachartzanim, right, we see as in before with the machlokot about it, we worried that they might kill you or something. Rabbi Meir was much more strict here also. Hachartzanim vazagim, if you have the grape skins and the pits, shalavdei kochavim asurim v'isuran isur na'ah, because they often came from the wine press and they had some wine on them, and therefore, again, it's like a little bit in them maybe, but it's still forbidden. Divrei Rabbi Meir, chachamim obrim, lachin asurim, if they're moist, then yes, because they have wine in them. But yeveshim, if they're dry, mutarim, right? You don't have to worry that maybe a little flavor will come out of them from their wine. No, that's too extreme. Hamorayis ugvinat beit unyaki shalavdei kochavim asurim v'isuran isur hana'ah divrei Rabbi Meir. Chachamim obrim ein isuran isur hana'ah. We have again another debate about benefiting from it. So we have morayis, which is fish, brine, that they would put a little bit of wine in it. So since it has wine, it's forbidden in isuran isur hana'ah. That makes perfect sense. Why would the rabbi say it's not forbidden to benefit? So two answers are given, either because the wine in the brine is not really there for the taste of the wine. So what's it there for? It's there to take out the bad smell of the fish. So like to counterbalance. So because of that, it's not there for the wine itself, and therefore it's permitted. That's one option. Another option is it's so little, the amount of wine they put in compared to the fish brine, that we just don't consider it significant. And again, Rabbi Meir does, like we saw before. It's the same kind of thing as a ta'arovet from before, this mixture. When there's a little bit that comes out, we're not going to view that as so significant. According to the rabbis, Rabbi Meir does. The cheese of Beit Unyaki we're going to understand in a few minutes. Or maybe not. Amar Rabbi Yehuda. So now we end up with this interesting statement of Rabbi Yehuda, or a story he tells about a conversation between Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Yoshua. Sha'al Rabbi Yishmael at Rabbi Yoshua k'shayu malchim baderech. So they were walking one day, and Rabbi Yishmael asked Rabbi Yoshua the following question. Amar lo, mipnei ma asru gvinot of kochavim. Why did they prohibit the cheese of the idol worshippers? Amar lo mipnei shema'amidim otam bekeva shel nevela. It's because how do they process cheese? They put it in the open, the stomach. They take the stomach of a dead animal, wasn't slaughtered properly. Nevela is forbidden in general, and they put it in the stomach, and the enzymes in the stomach process the cheese. Right, this is how cheese is made. So therefore, we're concerned. Right, it's not kosher. Amar lo. So Rabbi Yishmael says back to him, how could you say that it's a problem because it was processed in the keva there of the animal? Halo kevat olah chamura mi kevat nevela. If you take you take a scale of severity, what's more severe? The keva of the olah, okay, of a burnt offering, which is completely forbidden to benefit from, or the keva of a nevela, which is just a dead animal, which wasn't slaughtered properly, which, what does it say in the Torah, right? You can give it to someone else, you can give it to your dog, you can benefit from it. It's just forbidden to eat. So obviously an olah is more severe. Now Amru, and they say, continues Rabbi Yishmael, Kohen shedato yafa. If a Kohen, now what does mean dato yafa? If he can tolerate this and doesn't find it disgusting, if he wants, he can either sorfa or shorfa, not clear whether it's a sin or a shin, there's a machloket about this, but sorfa chaya, he can swallow it live, meaning you don't even have to cook it. He could swallow what's in the keva. Okay, there's like a fat in the keva. He could swallow it, not right, you're right, not live, raw. He can swallow it raw, okay, without cooking it. Okay, now basically what he's saying is the keva of an olah is totally fine, even though you're not really allowed to benefit from an olah, but what's in the keva is not considered like really significant or problematic. V'lo hudulo. Now the rabbis actually didn't agree with him. However, aval amru ein nehenim v'lo mo'alim. They said, look, you can't really benefit from it. Okay, so they didn't agree that you can eat it, and you can't benefit from it, but there's no isur of me'ilah, which means by Torah law, this is not really prohibited. Okay, if you benefit from it, what's me'ilah? That's benefiting. So you can drink it, but benefit. You shouldn't benefit. Really what it means is by rabbinic law, but by Torah law, it's actually fine. So now Rabbi Yishmael says basically, look, if the keva of a nevela can really be, the keva of an olah can theoretically be eaten by a kohen, theoretically, okay, maybe not practically, but by Torah law, it's not forbidden. There's no isur me'ilah. Then wouldn't you think that the keva of a nevela, that you use it to process the cheese, is not a problem? Amar lo, Rabbi Yeshua said to him, fine, you're right. It's not a kashrus issue. Then it's a different issue, right? He thinks, right? He's like, okay, so that must not be the issue. Amar lo, must be that they're using the kevot from, right, the stomachs of the agalim, right, the animals that were worshipped for Avodah Zarah purposes, or that were maybe used to offer sacrifice to Avodah Zarah. So it's actually a problem of Avodah Zarah, okay, not kashrut, which makes more sense that it's in our Mishnah, okay, that it doesn't have to do with kashrut. We're not talking about kashrut here, we're talking about Avodah Zarah. So, Amar lo, in ken lama lo asura b'hana'ah. Well, Rabbi Yishmael says back to him, well, it's very nice that you're saying that, but that creates a different problem, which is, why did the rabbi say it's not forbidden to benefit? We learned anything that's Avodah Zarah is forbidden to benefit from. So why is the cheese not forbidden to benefit from, according to the rabbis? Well, Rabbi Yehoshua's response is very interesting. He changed the topic of conversation. Didn't want to discuss this. Why? It's a very good question. The Gemara is going to obviously address this question in a bunch of tapim. Get back here and say, why did he move him to a different topic? And I want you to think about what topic he switched him to, and does this have anything to do with anything? So he basically takes him off topic, and he doesn't want to answer him. Amar lo. Yishmael, he says, Yishmael, I'm going to explain to you. Or Yishmael achi. Okay, some people add. Yishmael achi. Hey, achata koreh. How do you read the following pasuk? Okay, mamash off topic. Ki tovim dodecha miyayin. Your love is better for me than wine. This is a pasuk in Shir HaShirim. Oh, ki tovim dodayich. Or your love in feminine is better for me. Is it, because there's no vowels in the Torah, in the prophet, in the Megillot, in any of these books, in the Tanakh, no vowels. So is it feminine or masculine? Now, what does it matter, right? So there's a female and a male in this story. It's a love story. And the male character is supposed to be a representative of God, and the female is representative of the Jewish people. So who's saying to who that your love is better for me than wine? Amar lo ki tovim dodaich. So Rabbi Yishmael says it's obviously the man to the woman. Amar lo ena davar ke. Rabbi Yishmael says no, Rabbi Yeshua says no, you're wrong. Sharei chavero melamed alav, because the next pasuk teaches us, because it says l'reach shmanecha tovim, which there it's definitely masculine. Now it's not really clear why. You have to read the end of the pasuk to see. Because at the end of that pasuk, we're by the way in the first chapter, very beginning of Shir Shirim, we're now in verse 3 before we're in verse 2. It says al ken alimot ahavucha. Alamot are virgins. And that's why virgins love you. So obviously these psukim are referring to the man, because virgins love men, not women, and therefore it's the man. Okay, end of conversation, end of Mishnah. Very strange. What does this have to do with anything? So first of all, I was thinking that maybe you can connect at least some idea to at least our Mishnah. Tovim dodecha miyayin. Now they were talking about the cheese, but the wine also has to do with these libations to the idols. And tovim dodecha miyayin is saying, you're more beloved to me than wine. And it's basically the Jews saying to God, if we view it as this allegory, the Jews saying to God, you're more beloved to me than wine. And, if we have all these prohibitions on wine, it's kind of frustrating. You can't drink wine, this, that, the other thing. But it's saying, God is more important to me than wine. And therefore these mitzvot are more important to me than actually drinking the wine. So anyway, I thought to connect it a little bit, even though it's not really connected to the cheese thing. And obviously was trying to get him off topic. So food for thought, or wine for thought. So we're going to move on now to the Gemara. Yayin minalan. How do we get that wine is permitted to benefit from? And we're going to do one of those. Wine is prohibited because it's compared to this. And then why is that prohibited? Oh, because that's compared to this. And why is that prohibited? Because that's compared to this. Okay, we're going to have one of those. Okay. Yain minalan. So where do we get it? Amar Ravu Amar Kra Asher Chelev Zvachemo Yochelu Yishtu Yein Nesicham. This is in Hazinu. And it's saying, in the end, Jews are going to sin. They're going to eat the chelev of their sacrifices that they offer to their gods. And they're going to drink the wine of their libations, of the idols. So we'll notice it compares in the pasuk the wine of their libations to the chelev of their offerings. Ma zevach asur b'hana'ah. Well, the animals they slaughter and all the parts of it, right? The chelev also is forbidden to benefit from. Afna yayinami asur b'hana'ah. And therefore the wine will be forbidden also. Okay, zevach gufei minal. And how do we know that their things that they worship to their gods are forbidden, their sacrifices? Dichtiv. This pasuk we've quoted a bunch of times. It's a pasuk in Tehillim that's describing what we just read in last week's parsha in Balak about the Baal Peor. They clung to Baal Peor and they ate from the zvachim of the dead. So now, right, because basically if idols, they're dead, they're not meaningful. But the point is, ma meit. They're making this comparison between the zevach and the meit. Right? Each time we're going to make a comparison, a pasuk between two things. Ma meit asur b'hana'ah, just like a dead body you can't benefit from. Also, av zevach nami asur b'hana'ah. So now the obvious is, how do we know a meit is forbidden b'hana'ah? So, meit gufei minalan, atya sham me'egla rufa, k'tiv hacha, vatamat sham Miriam. It says Miriam died there. There's death with the word sham. Uk'tiv hatam va'arfu sham eta egla b'nacha. With the egla rufa, they break the back of the neck right there in the nachal. So mal halan asur b'hana'ah, afkanami asur b'hana'ah. Just like egla rufa is forbidden to benefit from, also a dead person's forbidden to benefit from. V'hata minal, and how do we know egla rufa? And this will get us to the end at least. Amrei debei Rabbi Yanai kapara k'tiva kekodashim. It's there for atonement. What else is there for atonement like sacrifices? Well, sacrifices we know are forbidden to benefit from. That's the whole Isur Me'ilah. We don't need to prove it. That says it explicitly in the Torah. So basically now let's go backwards. Or forwards. We're going to start from the first one. It's the sugya in reverse. We have sacrifices are forbidden to benefit from, for sacrifices to God. From there we learn to egla rufa, because it's kapara, and that's kapara. From egla rufa, because of the word sham, and the word sham appears by the dead body, by Miriam when she died. We're going to say also a dead body is forbidden to benefit from. From there we get to the sacrifices to the other gods, because they're called zivchei metim. From there we get to the chelev zvachimo and yein nesicho. So the yain and the zevach are the same, and from there we get to that the wine is forbidden to benefit from. Okay, now we're going to end with these two sugyot about starting from our Mishnah. So now we get back to this line, the Mishnah that I told you was a little bit strange. It says their vinegar, if it was originally wine. So pshita, mishum da'achmitz pakale sule, right? Just because it turned to vinegar, if it was forbidden because they offered as a libation to their gods, then who cares if it turns to vinegar? Once it's forbidden, it's forbidden. Why should that make any difference? Now, obviously it doesn't make a difference, but why is the Mishnah telling you? It's completely obvious. So Amarav Ashi Ha'atalashmina, what they wanted to do was to compare it to a different case. Specifically, if it's vinegar that was wine in the hands of the Gentile, it's a problem. But if you give a Gentile vinegar, you don't have to worry about anything. And that's what he's telling us. You can infer from there. If we take our vinegar and give it to an idol worshiper, you don't need a seal within a seal, right? This double seal, we've talked about that before. First of all, if you're worried about a libation, well, they don't offer libations. And right? And they don't offer libations from vinegar. Nobody would offer a libation of vinegar. It's spoiled wine. And if you're worried they're going to swap it with their vinegar that was originally wine in their possession, it could be yein nesech. Well, lo since it's already one seal, there's no reason to be concerned that they're going to undo the seal, redo it. You don't have to worry about it having a double seal, right? A double seal would protect it even more, but you don't even need that. That's the chidush. And from here we move on to very similar things said about yayin mavushal, right? Yayin mavushal is very common, particularly in Chutz La'aretz. It's much less so in Israel. It's a way to avoid the whole yein nesech issue. Once the wine is cooked, they can't offer it as a libation. Or they won't offer it as a libation, and therefore cooked wine is not a problem. So Rabbi Eli, we're going to have the same kind of thing. Yayin mevushal shalovdei kochavim shayam mitchilato yayin asur. Well, if you have yayin mevushal that was originally in the hands of the Gentile before it was cooked, the idol worshipping Gentile before it was cooked, it's going to be a problem, right? And nowadays, right, again, this is one of those things that applies also to any non-Jews as well, even though they're not offering libations. So, pshita. So they say, again, this is obvious. If it was offered as libation before, and then they cooked it up, it doesn't change anything. It's still forbidden. Just because you cook it doesn't take away the isur. So again, they're going to say the same thing. Okay, that's why, let's say you buy yayin mevushal, and it's sealed, right? Or you give them yayin mevushal, right? You can't buy from them. But if it was sealed and you give it to them, and then you take it back from them, it's not a problem. You don't have to worry that they swapped it with their own, because you don't need a double seal. Because again, once it's already cooked and you give it to them, well, they can't offer it as a libation. If you're worried they're going to swap it with their own, well, since there's one seal, you don't have to worry that they're going to do that. Obviously, once it's open and they come in contact with it, if you're there, that's why they can open the wine for you and pour it, because if you're there, there's no problem because you see that they're not swapping it. The only issue is swapping. It's not an isuch issue. Okay, and there we got and touched on the famous topic of yayin mevushal. So we started our sugya today with all sorts of remedies, continuing along that. What foods to avoid, what foods to eat, what to avoid when bloodletting. From there we went back to the hair cutting, which had two issues. One is a Jew cutting hair of an idol worshiper who's growing the bloodletting, and the second is a Gentile cutting the hair of a Jew, as perhaps it might come to, right, this idol worshiper might want to kill the Jew, and therefore you should beware. And again, we had the machlokes of Rabbi Meir and the rabbis, and then we went through the story, and we got to the 6 things that Rabbi Melchiah and Rabbi Malkiah said, and the machlokes about who said what. One of them being the bloodletting issue, and giving it a framework of how much space around the bloodletting you have to keep away. 3 fingers of width. Then we got to this new Mishnah, which started talking about all things that Gentiles have, the Gentiles, idol worshipping Gentiles are involved with, that we cannot benefit from. Okay, so the wine, the vinegar, anything that has wine in it, and cheese, and meat that went into their idol worshipping house, right? All these having to do with idol worship, right? They thought maybe the cheese had to do with kashrus. In the end, they explained, no, it has to do with idol worship. And although we didn't really figure out then why the Isur Hana'ah is not, why there isn't Isur Hana'ah in that case, according to the rabbis, we had some more machlokot between Rabbi Meir and the rabbis, and we ended with the Mishnah with this interesting conversation between Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Yeshua that gets cut short because Rabbi Yeshua just doesn't want to go anymore and really explain things ad sof until completion to Rabbi Yishmael, where we're left with a lot of questions there. And then we ended with, how do we know wine is forbidden for benefit? And we learned that from Spachim, which we learned from the mate, which we learned from Egla Rufa, which we learned from the word kaper, from sacrifices. Then we just ended with these two lines, both one in the Mishnah and one said by Rabbi Eli, who about these statements about yain mevushal and chometz, if it was originally in the possession of the Gentile before it was cooked or before it became vinegar, it's a problem, which I say isn't that very obvious. Well, it was trying to exclude a different case, which wouldn't be a problem if it was in our possession. We gave it to them when it was already mevushal or it was already chometz. We don't have to worry, not that they're going to be menasech, and we also don't have to worry that they're going to swap it for their own if we sealed it. Okay, if we didn't seal it, it's more of a problem. But one seal is enough. You don't need two seals. With that, we finish for today. Wishing everyone a good day and Shnishma b'sachot tovot.